this morning. We have State Representative Debbie Myers Martin. We have Police Chief Wells from Robbins, and we have Willette Benford, uh, a decarceration organizer from Live Free, Illinois. And so we're excited today. We get to talk about justice, and we just wanted to have a conversation on the bill that has been passed in Springfield about police reform. And so we know that there are always, they say, three sides to a story. It's probably about 10 or 11 sides to every story. But we just wanted to hear from people who have been impacted in various capacities and talk about this bill and how it affects us and what we can expect moving forward. And so I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into our conversation. So, State Representative, would you like to start off by introducing yourself?
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be joining your other illustrious panelists to have this discussion. I'm State Representative Debbie Myers Martin. I represent the 38th District, which is 15 municipalities in the South suburbs. I don't do as well as Representative Davis in naming them by heart, but Markham, Harvey, Hazelcrest, Country Club Hills, Oak Forest, Tinley Park, Frankfurt, Mokina, Olympia Fields, Homewood, Flossmoor, Richton Park, Park Forest, University Park, and Tinley Park, if I didn't say Tinley Park. So I call the heart of the Southland, and very happy to be here today to discuss the criminal justice reform bill that was passed in last year's session in Springfield. So welcome, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being here, and you did a good job in naming all of those to me. If I didn't have a list in front of me, somebody would be left off or calling me and saying you didn't mention my name. I would be in big trouble. Chief Wells, can you introduce yourself for us?
Good morning, everyone, on this illustrious panel this morning. Um, I'm Chief Roy Wells, the current chief of the Village of Robbins, but effective this Tuesday, May 25th, I will be sworn in as the new chief of Phoenix, Illinois. So my last day in Robbins will be Monday. I had a great career there. I was there 7 years, and I did a total of 31 years at the Harvey Police Department. I'm currently the vice president of South Suburban Associations of Chiefs of Police, and also on the executive board for the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. I'm very pleased to be a part of this panel this morning. And Trustee Craig, thank you for inviting me. And that's all I have.
Okay. See, he left us out. Now he's the commissioner on the board of in Natchitoches of the Police and Fire Commission. So he has so many jobs. What did he name about 15 too? You guys are y'all heavy. Y'all got it going on. Well,
thank you.
Willette, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm trying to come off. Good morning, everyone. I'm Willette Benford, and I am the decarceration organizer for Live Free, Illinois. I'm also the board chair for the Fully Free campaign to end permanent punishment. And I am glad to be here with you all.
Well, thank you. So what does a decarceration organizer do for those who may not know?
Decarceration organizer is committed to emptying out the prisons. You know, those that have been wrongfully convicted, those that are policed differently, people that look like me, you know, people that look like us are policed differently. And so decarceration is committed to revamping you. It's difficult, really, really difficult to reform corruption, but this criminal justice bill is a start. So yeah, decarceration, I am committed to ending mass incarceration among our people.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, and so Representative Myers Martin, you talked about the bill that passed in Springfield. Can you just give us some information, some background about the bill and the impact that you feel that the bill will have on police reform?
Well, thank you very much. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that I also represent the village of Matheson, where my district office is. So I don't know how I could have left that out, but
I thought I heard that, and I said, "Did I hear Max?" Maybe I wasn't listening closely, so I didn't want to call that out. Okay.
well, I had to mention. So House Bill 3653 was passed in last year's session during lame duck. It was an initiative coming out of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus in response to the the tragic death of George Floyd, as well as many others who have been killed by police and unjustifiably. So I was very happy to be part of that. Let me say that the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus held hearings, subject matter hearings for this criminal justice reform, over 100 hours of subject matter hearings. So when you hear the response and the complaint from police and law enforcement agencies saying that it was pushed in the middle of the night and nobody knew about it and nobody had been approached and no one had had a conversation or the opportunity to have a conversation, that's absolutely not true. As I said, over 100 hours of subject matter hearings took place. So what I would like to do is just give an overview of what the bill does and what it doesn't do, because there was a lot of misinformation out in the public as well as far as what was in the bill. So what the bill does is that it modernizes sentencing laws. It does or will end cash bail, but that's over the course of 2 years. That's not immediately. It's over the course of 2 years. And it does not mean that everybody just gets to walk free. It still has to be a court procedure. A judge has to make a decision whether someone is ready to go out back into the public or not. So that was a misrepresentation of the ending of cash bail. It institutes certification and decertification systems statewide for police officers. It will require complete use of body cameras, again, a ramp up over the next 4 years. So when law enforcement agencies say they don't have the money to do that, that we're putting state mandates on them with no function, no ability to pay, that is not true. Over the course of 4 years, and there are all kinds of resources available that agencies can tap into. It reforms crowd control response, amplifies law enforcement training standards, prevents destruction of law enforcement misconduct records, connects substance abuse treatment programs with first responder duties, increases and improves de-escalation and mental health training for law enforcement, creates 2 police misconduct databases for public viewing and transparency, requires police to develop a plan to protect children during search warrant raids, empowers the Attorney General to investigate deaths occurring in police custody, and addresses officer wellness and mental health awareness screenings. It also will create the ban on chokeholds and other extreme measures, and it created a task force to examine qualified immunity and other constitutional rights and remedies. So those are all the things that the bill does do. What it does not do is defund the police. People love to throw that phrase out, but it absolutely is not correct in the context that it is given. It does not modify or remove qualified immunity protections for police departments. And that was a big issue. And we can get into that later on because it's still ongoing. It's even ongoing in terms of negotiations in Washington for the federal criminal justice reform bill that's being discussed now. It does not change or take away collective bargaining rights, does not allow those that are charged with a serious offense and are a risk to a person or a community or at risk of willful flight to be released, does not prevent a judge from revoking pretrial release, and does not alter prison time for individuals serving time for heinous crimes. So that was something that the caucus put out to make sure that people, the public, understood what the bill did and did not do. And I think that this is a beginning because, again, the qualified immunity piece is very controversial. I know I spoke with many of the police chiefs in my district. Chief Davis, who is now the president of the Illinois Association of Police Chiefs, and also the police chief in Hazel Crest, spoke with him several times, spoke to the director of the Black Police Officers Association. So I was trying to get a feel for what the complaints were. And so, again, I think that this is a start, but certainly it does not address all of the issues that are still, because we see them every day. We see them every day. So it does not, it has not completely addressed the issues. So.
Well, thank you very much. And so, Chief Wells, I'm not looking to you to respond or comment on what State Rep Myers Martin indicate. Why don't you just share with us your thoughts on the bill and what you think? Just give us your thoughts. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Okay, thank you. Just like State Rep Ms. Martin said, this is holding officers accountable. This is all about accountability. Yeah, it was some pushback, but I think it's well needed. As a law enforcement professional for all these years, first thing officers do, they want to push back because they don't think this is something good for them. But my point is, and I tell my officers every day, you have to be accountable for your actions. If you're doing the right thing, this will not affect you. And there are bad police officers out there, but those people will be exposed and they should not be in law enforcement. And like Chief Davis, like he's the new president, we talk on a regular basis about this. He had some pushback, but like State Rep Martin said, a lot of this information was passed on to the different unions throughout the state, the different associations, and I don't think they believed it was going to happen. And now it's happened, and now we have to just be accountable. I support it 100%. There was a few things in there that I wasn't happy with, but we got to work around it. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we don't have any more George Floyd situations, any other situations. And it could be color, any color. Everybody have to be held accountable.
Thank you. Willette Benford, what are your thoughts about the bill?
My thoughts about the bill, Reverend Robbie, is that it's one of the greatest things that have happened in decades. The no cash bail is a way for poor people to not be sent to prison because they plead out and they don't have the money to post bail. The majority of people, Black people, people of color, sit in jail simply because they're poor. They're sent to prison because they cop out because they don't have the money to bail out. And so, Black people, like I said, make up like 13% of the Illinois adult population, but over 28% of those arrested and convicted of a crime. And so, that in itself tells you that there was something wrong. Also, with the police accountability. You know, there was a lot of fear mongering going on when the bill first passed, you know, amongst a lot of people saying that everybody was going to be let out of jail. And the moment that someone was arrested, they were going to be immediately just that fear mongering that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
pushed out, which in all actuality, we know that was not true. You know, there was a screening process, but what it did was it began to hold those in authority accountable for their actions, which very well should be. And then it gave people an opportunity that if you were poor and you were fighting your case from uh, outside, you had an opportunity, because we see that people that are outside that bond out, they normally get probation, or they are more well able to keep their homes, keep their, you know, their children, things like that. So it really just gave people an opportunity to fight from the outside. And I just think that when something like this bill happens, the first immediate thing is for fear mongers to push that fear out there and say, oh no, now you're going to have criminals running the street, and, you know, to make the public afraid. So I think that it is one of the best things that the Black Caucus has done, and that Governor Pritzker done, and it cannot not do anything except make our state better.
You know, a few years ago, um, when I was working with a different organization, and we were trying to work on de incarceration, one of the things that we looked at, and most people don't realize, there were at that time there were 10,000 inmates in Cook County Jail, and the statistics stated 70% of them didn't need to be there because they were non-violent crimes
Mm-hmm.
that happened. And nobody talks about the statistics of how many people lost their jobs, lost their families because they were placed in jail and didn't have the money, as you stated, to bail out. It has a huge impact on families, especially Black and Brown families. And one of the things that we did at that particular time, we did court watching, and it's real interesting. And my husband is going to say I'm throwing him under the bus again, but I'm really not, because this is just a real situation that I just want to express that when he first went to court, you know, and looking at it, it was just like, why do we have to be here? Who are these criminals? And you know what's going on? And people generally presume that if they were arrested, that they are really bad people, and they were criminals. And so it was him, I, and my granddaughter who sat there and watched a whole afternoon of what was happening. And he saw all these people of color lined up, going before a judge, didn't have much to say, didn't have any representation, saw how they were talked down to, how they were treated, and how they were sent back. The only people who had an opportunity were those people who actually had someone representing them. And when they had somebody representing them that, in which they could say, this is my son, or this person, he's got a job, or this person is part of this type of community, they got a chance to maybe move forward with a lower bill. But other than that, it's amazing that we don't understand that some people, when you say poor, cannot afford a $250 bail. And so, you guys, what do you guys think about that?
Can I jump in, Reverend Robbie? Because we know, let's just be real. We know that mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow. It is a way to get cheap slave labor. There's no other way where you can get somebody to work the way they do inside for 70 cents a day. No way. And it's like 12 major companies that use prison slave labor. You know, major companies, you know, that use that slave labor. And, you know, we know that all the way back in like the 1800s, vagrancy, loitering, charges like that were given to Black people that had recently just been freed. Those charges were given to Black people to incarcerate them, to lock them up, vagrancy. You know, a $3,000 bond for vagrancy. So if you couldn't pay it, then you were incarcerated for 15 years. That was a system designed to keep Black people under oppression. You know, I'm formerly incarcerated. You know, I'm a formerly incarcerated individual. And I believe that people ought to always be able to re-enter society with dignity. People that look like me are policed differently. You know, by the grace of God, I was given an immediate release. I believed God and I was given an immediate release. You know, things were overturned, you know, and God is a great God. And however, there are some of our people that look like us that don't know God, that can't believe God for an immediate release. So therefore, we are there to speak up for them. And when people enter the court system and they can articulate or advocate for themselves in a courtroom, then they're considered someone that is less than, and they should be shuffled off to prison, which is wrong. That is wrong. A woman that is living from day to day end up in jail, lose her children, her home, her job, and everything because of one small offense. Pulled over maybe for a traffic ticket and had a warrant and didn't know, really didn't know, and sit in jail for 2 months, 2 to 3 months, and everything she ever worked for is lost because she doesn't have the resources that her white counterpart has.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's something. Um, Chief Wells, Representative Myers Martin, what do you guys have to say in regards to those types of situations?
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens. Uh, since the court system now, with I know with Tom Dart, they're trying to do everything possible to give people bail so they can be out, so they can move around pending a court date. Um, but I understand what she was saying, and it's heartbreaking sometimes because some situations, some people don't deserve that. But then we also have to, like I said, it's all about accountability.
And
Okay.
I will have to say that I agree with what Ms. Benford said. And you just look at it, just the core injustice in the fact that two people are arrested. Let's say one is arrested for shoplifting and the other is arrested for assault. But you mean to tell me that the person, just because they don't have the money and they've been arrested for shoplifting, remains in jail, and someone else who was charged with assault, but they have the money, they get to walk free? There's something just completely unjust about that. And as the Black Caucus has said over and over again, we have been trying to address the institutional racism that is at the core of so many of the judicial laws that we find not only in Illinois but throughout the country, and probably globally, but right here we see it on an everyday basis. And so I'm in total agreement that the no cash bail needed to happen. Doesn't mean that it does not have parameters to it, but it really did need to happen to address a long stem issue that has been going on.
Um, I like what you're saying, Representative Myers Martin, because I was reading The New Jim Crow. I think that Willette Benford just mentioned that. And
Yes.
there's another book that I love too, and I couldn't find my actual book, so I can bring it up. It's called From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime. And you talk about long-standing issues that our country has had to deal with. And reading these two books, they talk about where did all this come from. Willette, you went all the way back to slavery, and we know what happened then. But then we get to 1964 when Kennedy starts to look at civil rights and trying to pass a Civil Rights Act. But the first thing that he does is put together the Kerner Commission so he could look to see the impact of what was happening in communities of color based on disenfranchisement, the lack of access to jobs and other things that could be impacting the community. Um, but unfortunately, we know Kennedy got assassinated. And so when Johnson came in, he read the Kerner report. And the Kerner report, and they mentioned it during the trial of the officer uh, that killed George Floyd. And when he gave his analysis, he spoke about the Kerner report and what it stated in terms of a lot of the issues that are in our communities, are in communities of color, have been because of the lack of access and over policing in those communities. But what also was stated was what Johnson did was had the Moorhan report, and that blew me away, which stated that Black people were pathological, that they didn't have the ability to function in society, that it had nothing to do with white racism. It was because that we were a culture of people that didn't have the ability to rise above where we were at that time. He said it was based on the fact that there were these unwed mothers that were just having babies and could not did not know how to raise children, and that no matter what they did, the outcome was still going to be the same. That really blew my mind. And from that point, what he was looking to institute was a war on poverty and initiate King's plan uh, to end poverty. But what he did was make a war on crime. But the war on crime was situated in the Black community because of what those statements were. And you can see where every president thereafter increased uh, their efforts in the Black community. And I think it was, I can't remember which president, but he even, that's when they started militarizing police departments. And if you didn't militarize your police department, you couldn't get federal money. And so it was to your advantage to militarize police departments. And when they found that these policies impacted whites, they even altered the policy to make sure that they focused them on Black people. And so I heard Representative Martin say earlier about defunding police. And when I hear that statement, what comes to mind is to reverse all this money that was used to criminalize Black communities and militarize police departments and reallocate those monies into programs that help build up and provide resources to our communities. So we don't have to worry about, people talk about being Black while driving. I just call it being Black while living, because you just can't hardly live and be Black in America without people looking at you and assuming that you're not capable of being able to participate in society. Even if you're one that have advanced degrees, they'll say that you only got it because you had access to funds that they didn't have access to. It's just always these issues around our ability to be able to succeed, because we are such a resilient people and such a people who have the ability to go beyond what people expect of us. We've been able to overcome a lot, but there are a lot of people who have been impacted so negatively that have not been able to do that. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, when you talk about the phrase defunding the police, I think that was used to get people, excited and to get them, to overreact to the bill. But in essence, the elements of the funding question is that police go into situations that really would be much better served if it was a mental health counselor. That policemen have been put in charge of mental health. And that is something that uh, the bill talks about, and the conversations have been, well, why don't we allocate funds to make sure that the correct people, the right people, the appropriate people are responding to some of these situations that don't require police, because many of them have to do with mental health. Many of them have to do with society and social ills, and many of them have to do with things that police are not equipped to handle. And that is why we talk about training, we talk about enhancing training for police. But the funding part was like, well, let's spend some of the money into programs, as you said, programs that will help our youth, programs that will help people who have been jobless, people. So I think that that is crucial for there to be dialogue, first of all, and that's why this is such a great idea to be here today, is that we need to continue to have this dialogue. We need to continue to bring people into the conversation. Uh, and the Black Caucus even said that this bill was designed to get law enforcement officers who have been totally against this, get them to the table so that there can be productive and effective conversation and dialogue and negotiation.
Thank you. Chief Wells?
Yeah, I like to add on. Um, the challenge is with smaller agencies like mine is the funding. And State Rep said that funding will be available. That's what we need, because it's going to help. Because like she said, if you have a situation where the person has some type of a mental crisis, we need to have somebody there that, like you said, that could be dispatched there or could be hired by that department, and that person could come out. And it really makes a difference, because, like I said, we in charge of being the counselor, well as the health expert, until we get an ambulance there, and we might be able to prevent that before that person goes to the hospital. So yeah, it's very important. So I agree the funding is going to be the biggest issue, because, like I said, some departments, I know Park Force hired someone to do that, and I think Matson has Mia Carter that helps with that. So yeah, well deserved, and that's what we need.
Thank you. Willette?
Reverend Robbie, you said a lot. And so I just kind of want to go back a little bit when you were talking about the war on crime, and, in 1996, the war on drugs, well, 90s, in the 90s, when, they talked about the war on drugs. And we really know that at the core of it, it was white supremacy, and it was a war on Black folks, because the same disparities that happened then, 100-to-1 crack law, 100 times more sentence to one. If someone had cocaine, powder cocaine, and someone had crack cocaine, they were sentenced in such disparities, because we know that white people were more likely to use powder cocaine back then than Black people or people of color. And so Black people were given a natural life sentence for crack cocaine, as opposed to white people going to Country Club Hills treatment center, and so I just think that, even now, as we move forward in this work and move forward in our society, all the way up to George Floyd, there is still poverty in the Black community is still criminalized. When being poor is criminalized in America. And, the resources that we talk about reallocating into our community is just so that we can begin to have the same opportunities that are afforded to our white counterparts. And those schools that their children attend, if only a few of us are getting out, then that's too few. If it's just us four and no more, it's too few. If the majority of our population is still living in extreme poverty, there's a problem. And so with the war on drugs, the war on crime, and with this criminal reform bill, it's just an opportunity, for us to just see. I mean, I think that with George Floyd, The reason why it was such a tipping point is everybody was stationary at home during COVID, and you could no longer look away from it. You couldn't look away from it. But let's just think about the trial. There was a dead man on trial. They didn't mention Derek Chauvin's history of everything that he did. They put George Floyd on trial, and being so inoculated with white supremacy, many people were like, they didn't really notice it. They put a dead man on trial. Had it been the other way around, that they would have pulled everything from that Black police officer's past, from a childhood all the way up until the day he got arrested. But they didn't do that. So there's still a problem, you know, and until we get comfortable talking about it. It's not my job to make people that have a white supremacy mindset comfortable. It is my job to speak the truth in love, but continue to speak the truth about the things that we see that are blatant in our face, that we continue to sweep under the rug to make white people feel comfortable. And that's not my job. God called me to speak the truth in love. And so I talk about things that are controversial because we live in a controversial time. People are dying in the streets. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for young Black men and Black boys, and the second leading cause of death for Hispanic boys and men, and the second leading cause of death of Black women between the ages of 15 and 34. That's a problem. And that violence doesn't only come from within the community, it is police violence too. So there's a problem on how we are policed, and we got to talk about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have some other guests that are on here, and they are guests. But if you guys have a question or would like to comment, feel free to step in. Brother Ramon indicated to me that, pardon me? Oh, I thought you were saying something. That it was George H.W. Bush in 1990 who started to criminalize, I believe that's what he was letting me know, the police departments. But we have also Rhonda on the phone, on the line with us, and Rhonda Walton. We have Marlene. If you guys would like to make a comment, please feel free to step in and interject as you feel. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ramon Honore. I'm a retired police officer with Cook County. I'm currently an investigator with the state of Illinois with financial profession regulation. And there are two things I'd like to ask Representative Debbie Myers. One was he indicated 100 hours of subject matter overview, and who was invited to those meetings, and did any police officers or police representatives attend the meetings?
Well, I did not directly organize those subject matter hearings. That was Senator L.G. Sims and Representative Justin Slaughter. But I do know that, okay, I do know that the Illinois FOP was invited to participate in those hearings. The Sheriff's Association was invited to participate. The coalition, the Illinois Association of Police Chiefs were invited to participate. So I know those are a few of the law enforcement agencies that were invited. Certainly, as I said, Justin Slaughter, Representative Slaughter worked very closely with Chief Davis from Hazel Crest and relied on him many times for input and direction as far as the bill went. So, but as I said, Senator Sims, they were in charge of actually organizing and doing the inviting, and actually all of the negotiations that took place during the assessing the bill and making sure that it was what we wanted it to do and say.
Okay, thank you for that response. That's really good information to know to provide additional insight or clarity to the naysayers. The second question I have is, did they consider requiring police officers to uh, have their own insurance, similar to what medical professionals are required to have, and
Mm.
instead of putting the onus on the municipality to pay for the uh, infractions that the officers may get involved in. So, it's just like if you can't have insurance as a healthcare provider, say a physician, you can't practice. And
Absolutely.
it also protects that organization that they're with against lawsuits, any frivolous lawsuits or anything. Did they ever consider anything like that for law enforcement officials? I know decertification, yeah, will take your badge away and everything like this, but to have insurance would take some of that cost away from the municipalities.
Well, absolutely. And that's certainly what I heard over the course of the negotiations regarding the bill and up to the passing of the bill, is that municipalities were quite concerned that that the indemnification comes from municipalities anyway. So the thought that individual police officers were going to be held personally responsible for any lawsuit that would come about was just not the case, because every municipality would indemnify their officers. But the hope was that because municipalities would be held responsible, they would also be more proactive in making sure that their police officers acted appropriately and stayed within the law. So they would put the pressure on their own officers to be correct in those situations. So as I said, I wasn't part of those negotiations, but I'm positive that that element about police having their own insurance came up. But let me say that the police unions would never sit down long enough to have that discussion in any kind of effective or productive way. But certainly you bring up a very valid point that other professionals, like the medical profession, have to have their malpractice insurance, and they cry the blues about it all the time, but they have to do it in order to practice. So that's a good element, and I certainly will bring that up to Representative Slaughter the next time I see him, just to find out, because I really don't know if how thoroughly they explored that as an option.
Just another caveat, it's additional. It's being a retired police officer, they strongly recommend that we carry insurance if we're going to carry while off duty, in case
Mhm.
there is a weapon, a shooting involved incident with me as a private citizen now. So I just think it's just another area that they could explore. That's just my personal opinion or thought on this, but thank you for the response. Appreciate it. I don't know if Chief Wells has anything he'd like to add to that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Being a private citizen, and now you're getting what they call Illinois Retired Officer Concealed Carry Permit. Uh, I would advise you to have that insurance. It's just going to cover you. I think the NRA is the one that sponsors that insurance. I'm not really in favor of the NRA, but I think it's something you need. Just like you said, just like a doctor, doctor has to have the same thing. So that's important.
I think that the statement in regards to funding came up in just about every conversation. How do you fund this stuff? And so I don't have necessarily answers, but I do know ARP funding, American Rescue Plan, has monies out there that can be utilized. And I think Willette talked about gun violence, and it's something that was passed in Biden's bill, and they're asking states and municipalities and cities to use 2% of the money that they receive for recovery to go towards this type of um, things that we're talking about. So we were talking in another conversation, just looking at the state got money, the county got money, and the different municipalities got money. And if you look at the state's money was 998 million. And if you take 2% of that, that's like $20 million that can be used for what they call gun control, but that would include if you wanted mental health services for a community. That would include whether or not, when you talk about paying for a police vest and ramping up to that, that would include looking at different types of programming and activities that you can do in a community to help youth get engaged in other activities that would then reduce them from being engaged in activities that would get them in trouble with law enforcement. And Willette could probably talk to it a lot better than I can because she's been involved a lot more. I'm new to that particular table, but there are resources that we know that are out there that can help with this conversation that we're having to give the resources that each community and police department needs in order to uh, deal with the issues that we've been talking about. Willette, go ahead.
Yes, the ARP funding, I don't know if ARP plan, it's when President Biden released that 1.9 trillion to all the states to be able to to recover from COVID-19 and the economic disparities that happened during COVID. Now, all of these funds are discretionary. So for Illinois got I think it's 7.3 billion. And so
it's now 8.1, but
okay, now 8.1 billion, and it's distributed across all these states. Now in Illinois, Live Free Illinois has been doing a multi-city launch about the ARP funding with a QR code on it so that you can reach out to your elected official to let them know that you fund peace. And to fund peace simply means that there's a blueprint that National has used that has been known to reduce gun violence in New York by 40% and in Oakland, California by 50%. It's a known strategy, a holistic approach with hospital intervention, trauma-informed care, street outreach, all of these different elements in an ecosystem that is known to reduce gun violence in those areas. There's a small group that is hard to reach, and this system has been known to reach them and reduce gun violence. And so we asking like the mayors, state reps, and the senators to fund peace and begin to ask those in those communities, those elected officials in those communities, to allocate that funding specifically for a gun violence prevention office in those areas. And to do that, because gun violence is the number one leading cause of death of young Black men and Black boys in certain cities, if you would put peace and allocate those resources into that, then that would reduce the gun violence in those areas because everybody can't reach people that look like me and you. And so the street outreach would be able to use people that not use, but employ people that look like you and I that could reach the people in the streets that are doing, that are either perpetrators or potential shooters, victims of gun violence. And so it would be a holistic approach. It wouldn't be just targeting someone that is a shooter, because we know that sometimes a shooter is someone in the neighborhood and in the community. This is just the hand he was dealt at that time as a kid. And so we got to look at it from a holistic approach. And the funding is available because it's discretionary. It wasn't money that was allocated to anything. So when the money came down, it doesn't, and if $3 million out of $54 million isn't enough to invest in Black lives, then what is? 3 million out of $54 million $54 discretionary dollars. That's what it takes to fund a gun violence prevention office for 2 years. 2 years.
And so,
4 million.
as we get ready to end the particular session, I didn't mean to cut you off, Willette. I thought you were.
No, you're fine, Pastor Reverend Robbie.
We can have people just give their closing statements, but I also want to just reiterate, Chief Wells had mentioned the fact that, like a resource officer in his area would be good. And if it's discretionary funding, and if that's the most impactful thing for that area, those discretionary funds can be allocated for those things. And so the things that Willette talked about are things that we do as organizers who are outreach people, but it doesn't mean it cannot be used and help police departments receive the training, equipment, and things that they need in order to be more impactful in their different communities. And so I'd just like to take a few minutes for each of you guys to give some closing comments before we end. And like to, again, thank you guys, because this, as I think Representative Martin, Debbie Myers Martin has stated, it's a good dialogue and one that we should be having more often so people can become more informed and educated about what's really happening with our funds, with the state, with the community, with the police departments, so we can be more engaged and understand what's happening and how we can be more impactful with it. And so we'll start again with Representative Martin.
Well, thank you again, Trustee Craig, for inviting me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed joining in the conversation and the dialogue. Certainly, I welcome people who want more information or want to continue this conversation to reach out to my office. As I said, my district office is in the village of Matheson, and I welcome those calls, those emails to talk about where we go from here, how we continue to move forward with this criminal justice reform, as well as some of the other pillars that were introduced during lame duck, having to do with healthcare and education and economics. So most of the, I would say that the Black Caucus and the pillar related to criminal justice reform, a lot of those recommendations came out of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. And so those recommendations were made, and not many of them thus far had been implemented. So this is a way to really tap into the expertise and the knowledge that was shared in that task force, and that also this bill created a task force to look at qualified immunity. And again, that is a big issue in every conversation related to criminal justice reform, whether to eliminate it or not, or how it can be modified so that police officers do not operate with complete immunity or complete impunity or whatever. So anyway, I would say that again, we have started the conversation. This bill is a work in progress. There's a lot of tweaking that still needs to be done. There's still a lot of conversations that need to be had with community groups, with law enforcement officers who are interested, who are open in looking at making reform a reality. Because so many, and I think that Chief Wells might have mentioned it, that, police officers, law enforcement officers are resistant to change. And so we have to have that conversation to show why we have to do this. I mean, at this point now in 2021, after we have witnessed what we have witnessed over the past year, and even before, because we know as a community and as a people that we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg, because now everybody has a camera. But you think about how many people who have been destroyed and killed and affected by bad policing, where there was no camera, there was no witness. And so we know that the time is now. I think even from a letter from Noble, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, even they said that they believed that they were in agreement with this criminal justice reforms of 3653. There were points that still needed to be tweaked and made better, but they were in agreement because we all realize that if we don't do something now, if we don't begin this process and this journey now, then when will we actually be able to make effective change? So I thank you again. I welcome the conversation. I welcome input. Certainly, we have been told about this money coming to the states, but the federal government did give us lots of guidelines on what it could be spent on and what it could not. So I now am the liaison to all of the Black mayors in the state of Illinois, and I'm bringing them into the conversation with the Black Caucus. That's the liaison with us, so that we can have that dialogue about how to maybe provide these community service officers who can implement some of these programs. So thank you again for the invitation and the opportunity. I have really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Chief Wells?
Thank you, Trustee Craig and Pastor Craig. I did not know that. That's good to hear. A lady of faith is always a person I want to be by. So I appreciate you inviting me this morning and being a part of this prestigious panel. But what I would say in my closing, I tell my officers, use these three acronyms, ACT. And they say, well, what do ACT mean? Accountability, control, your temper. And I tell them that all the time. Accountability, control, and temper. If you do that in law enforcement, 99% of the time, you're going to be okay when you're dealing with the public. But if you have a mindset that I'm the police and nobody can tell me what to do, those are the ones that gets in trouble. Mm-hmm. I'm the ones that gets in trouble. And, officers are put on probation when they start. Most departments, it's 12 months or 18 months. And what I deal with, and I watch it, and I don't say a lot, I watch. And if I see a person that's look like they're not going to be a part of this agency, I let them go, because those are the ones that's going to cause you problems down the road. And a lot of departments don't look. This is just me. Some might do the same thing I do, but a lot of times some of those situations don't get exposed until after they make probation. Now you have to deal with the unit. But still, if they don't belong there, they're not going to be there. And I know with the way laws are changing in this new House bill, and I talk to chiefs on a regular basis, they're getting rid of officers, or their hiring practices is changing. Because, and I'm just being honest, if you knew that person, and they don't even do background checks. I deal with departments on a regular basis. They don't do background checks, and I see this also working on the street. And I say, well, why didn't you go to their prior agency? That's a problem. And those are the ones that's suing. Those are the ones that's doing damage to our citizens. So once again, thank you today for letting me be here, a part of this panel, and I would like to participate in the future.
Thank you. Willette?
Thank you, Reverend Robbie, and thank you, State Rep Myers and Chief. I just really enjoyed this panel. And what I believe is that, back in the day, we had firemen that, you would call the firemen to get cats out the trees and things like that. And then, we realized that wasn't the best use of the fire department's time. And so we created the animal control department. That now they go in and get the cats out the trees, because the firemen are dealing with fires. They're dealing with cutting people out of cars. The police department's best use of their time is not to de-escalate domestic violent situations or mental health situations or things like that. So you create this ecosystem, so that you can use trained professionals and allocate dollars to that, so that police can do what is the best use of their time. encountering really, really, really bad situations. So I just think that as we begin to think about moving forward, that we need to think about what is the best use of a police officer's time. And so, and what is the best thing for a community as far as resources and funding. And so that is something that we need to begin to talk about and think about. And I just really enjoyed this panel. And I appreciate you for inviting me, Reverend Robbie. And I appreciate everyone that was on here. Thank you so much.
And I appreciate all of you. And I can say to everybody, I have personal experience in working with each person that's on the panel. I've seen Debbie Myers Martin in action. I've seen her work. I've been around her as she engages the community. Her office has always been open to me and being able to get access to her. So I appreciate you for that and what you do. Chief Wells is part of the Matheson Police Commission, and I've seen his work on that commission and everything he just said and what they did recently in hiring new uh, police for the village of Matheson, what they've the time that they've spent, and like he said, changing how our practices, how we look at things. Um, it has just been something an odd to me to observe from a distance and look at what they put into making sure that they had the right people, the diversity, and the people with the right character that would represent our community to help us to feel safe, and that they had a passion for the job that they were applying for. And Willette and I worked together with Live Free Illinois, and just to see her passion and working with her on a day-to-day basis has been um, wonderful. So I couldn't think of anybody better to be on this type of panel because of her passion and working with this. I thank each and every one of you on behalf of our pastors, the Reverend Dr. Trinell D. Felder and Reverend Dr. Alexis L. Felder, for participating in this panel. Reverend Vines is on the line. He did not say anything. He's our minister of justice. And so thank you for participating with us and being a part of the justice ministry and giving me the ability to go out and bring in programs and services that I think will impact our community as well as our church. I wish all of you have a good day. Enjoy fun in the sun today. And again, I look forward to all of you, all of us speaking again and continuing this conversation later. Thank you and have a good day. And
Thank you. Congratulations, Chief Wells.
Thank you.